very frustrated with field term limits are the answer. But are they? Joining us on our Newsmaker line is Rodney K. Smith with Utah Valley University as Director of the Center for Constitutional Studies. Rodney, how are you? And welcome to the show.
I'm doing fine, Rod. Thanks so much. I'm glad to be with you.
Why is this such an emotional issue for people at times, Rodney?
Well, I think there are a variety of reasons for that. Probably the major reason is a sense, as I indicated in the recent op-ed, that they have that government isn't working for them and government isn't responsive to them, and that they're looking for solutions. And one of the solutions that comes readily to mind, and the majority of Americans think it's a good idea, is term limits.
Rodney, how much did our founders, and that's what you point out in your article about this issue, wrestle with this idea of term limits?
Well, they considered it at the Constitutional Convention on 7 different occasions and rejected it every time. And they came out of a context where they had experienced term limits. And so they made the decision on the Constitutional Convention not to have term limits. And I would argue they're pretty wise.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'm along with you. I don't like the idea of term limits. I think the term limits can be dealt with either every 2 or 6 years, depending on what area you serve in the U.S. government. But the frustration that you bring up, people, Rodney, and a lot of people say, they get back in Washington, they see all this money, they get all this power, and they just refuse to leave. How would you respond to that argument on term limits?
Well, I think the answer to that, they continue to get reelected. And one of the major problems with term limits is you're taking away someone's right to vote for the person they want to vote for. And maybe we don't like the senior senator Kentucky, for example, but maybe we should leave that to Kentucky and the people who know him best to make that decision. And that, to me, is the core problem with term limits, is you take away someone's right to vote.
Yeah. How long is it? And have there been other attempts in the past, Rodney, to try and get this issue in front of voters?
Well, I think the example that people like to use, and it's people who favor term limits, is the example of the presidency. When we amended the Constitution after the Roosevelt years to provide for term limits for the president, I suspect that there are a lot of people who would have liked to vote for Ronald Reagan again, but weren't able to cast their vote in that direction. It opened the doors to Bill Clinton, or you could turn that on its head for Democrats, that people don't get the chance to vote for the person they want. But we did have that amendment, and that's an argument that people use in support of term limits.
Yes, an interesting argument, isn't it, Rodney? I don't think this is going away anytime soon. Do you?
I do not think it's going away anytime soon, but I do hope people will do what the framers did and give it a little thought. For example, if you were having a significant problem with Pakistan and India and a potential nuclear threat, would you rather have Dan Sullivan or John McCain making that decision? They're both Republicans. One would be term limited, John McCain. Other, Dan Sullivan out of Arkansas, is a very junior senator. The other thing that has happened, and I think it's the real cause of government not working, is since 1995, we've had the slope has gone down, and now over 50% of the members of the House and over 50% of the members of the Senate have served for 8 or fewer years. And therefore, we don't have the experience, and we don't have the capacity to get things done.
Rodney, thank you. I appreciate a few minutes of your time tonight.
Well, thank you so much, Rod, and thanks for your program.
All right, that's Rodney K. Smith. He's the director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at Utah Valley University, talking about the framers of the Constitution.